Freight brokers, what's the deal? How you feel, good people? Another day outside, you see the light. So that means we got another chance to live this wonderful thing that we call life. With that said, I think it's so important that we are first grateful for what we do have, who we are right now in this life. Because I think that's the only way for us to be, do, and have more, to be genuinely grateful for what you have right now. What are you grateful for? When you think about it today, on this day, what are you grateful for? Drop us a comment in the comment section and let us know what you're grateful for today. You know what I'm grateful for? I am so grateful, so immensely grateful for the opportunity to live right now in the year 2022. I believe right now we are in the best time in the history of man. Never in the history of man has the common man, the regular man, had access to information, to knowledge, to resources, to do, be, and have whatever it is that he wants. Never in the history of man has information been right at our fingertips, so accessible. So what excuse do we have? What excuse do we have now? I deliver no excuses, no complaints. Let's get to work. Let's get down to the business. In yesterday's training video, I talked to you about the fuel surcharge. I explained to you what the fuel surcharge is, how the fuel surcharge is calculated, and who gets the fuel surcharge. Is it the freight broker or is it the carrier? In today's training video, we'll talk about the accessorial charge. Now, when we talked about the fuel surcharge, we talked about it as a separate line item, different from the line haul rate. That's the same way that this accessorial charge will be looked at. It's a separate charge. So we have the line haul rate, the fuel surcharge, and in addition to that, we have the accessorial charge. So I'm going to talk to you today about what the accessorial charge is and how it works. So come on inside and let's get down to the business. Okay, so let's first start off talking about what an accessorial charge is. It's just a charge that's charged by the trucking company for different occurrences, different things that happen as the load moves. Or let's say, for example, the carrier got to his destination and he couldn't drop off the load. Let's say it's Friday. And for some reason, he couldn't drop off that load. It was no fault of his own. Now he has to wait through the weekend before he can deliver that load on Monday. Well, what we have to do now is pay him a layover fee. So that's a accessorial charge. That's a charge charged in addition to the line haul rate because of different occurrences. So when you have accessorial charges, now the question is, who pays the charge? Is it the freight broker or is it the shipper? I'll cover that next. Now, it's important to understand the relationship, how it works with the shipper, with the freight broker, with the carrier, with the freight broker. You see, the carrier does not have a relationship with the shipper. The freight broker does. The carrier and the freight broker have a relationship. So they have a contract together. Now, it's not the freight broker's freight, it's the shipper's freight. So when it comes down to an accessorial charge, who pays the accessorial charge is the shipper. But again, remember I told you that the trucker has no relationship with the shipper. So when he charges the accessorial charge, he'll be charging you as the broker. Now, what you need to do as a broker is you should get the shipper's accessorial policy before you ever even start working with the shipper. That's way it's clear. You know what shippers pay for layover fees. You know what shippers pay for the detention pay. So when you start setting up with your carrier and you start going over the contract, if your carrier has detention and say he has X amount of dollars he wants for detention, you need to make sure you go in and look at your policy and make sure that you can cover that amount. If not, you need to talk about that. Hey, we have a detention cap here at this number. Will this work? But don't get started in a load and then when detention happens, now you got to find out how detention works. Have all of that squared away before you get started. That way you know exactly what you need to do when it occurs. One of the most common accessorial charges that causes the most tension between freight brokers and carriers is the detention charge. This charge is charged by the carrier when they go to the pickup facility or the drop-off facility and they're not ready to load or unload them at the facility. Let's say they get to the facility and they have been there for 3 hours and they still have not gotten offloaded. Well, what our detention policy says is that if a carrier is waiting 3 hours to get offloaded or loaded, Then every hour after the third hour, we pay a detention fee. So if you have not talked about that prior to, then the carrier might say, hey, I want detention after 2 hours. So that's why it's so important to lay it out, make it plain what your policy is, what his policy is, make sure everything is jiving up, and then you go ahead and execute the load movement. There's really no reason for there to be any problems because you've already talked about it. You know what detention is. He knows what the detention policy is, and everything is smooth. When you don't talk, when you have in your mind that it's supposed to go a certain way and he has in his mind that it's supposed to go a different way, that's when heads start to bump. That's why you take care of those things beforehand so we don't have those problems in the end. Now, sometimes when carriers don't get paid accessorial charges, detention fees, layover fees, they blame the broker, especially the detention fee. They say, oh, the broker didn't pay me my detention. It's the broker's fault. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think the carrier has the responsibility to talk to that broker prior to moving the load, to let him know this is what I charge in the event of detention. And if he doesn't do this, he shouldn't look to blame the freight broker. He should put the blame squarely on his own shoulders. It's about 100% responsibility, taking responsibility for your own business, not waiting for somebody else to do it. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I certainly hope this information has been helpful. If you want to learn more about the freight broker business, I'll leave a free link in the description. It's my 5-video series titled How the Load Movement Process Works. It gives you a chance to come into the office with me, watch over my shoulder as I move loads, talk to shippers and carriers. That way you can get a better understanding of how the business works before you decide to come into it. And then if you want to know more about how much it's going to cost for you to start your own freight broker business, I'll leave a free video right here. So until the next time, I wish you the very best in your life and business. See you at the top because the bottom is much too crowded.